So, the party continued on their way sneakily through the ship. They know that they needed, or they knew that they needed to get their equipment back if they were to continue on their journey and hopefully recover the components that they required in order to finish off the Deus Ex. Um, so, making their way as sneakily as they could back down to the cargo bay. They knew on their flight in on the hover platform that there was an island that was floating but offset from the rest of the ship, and they had interrogated, I believe they interrogated anyway, I can't remember why they were going there, but they'd had enough information to know that most likely this was where their items were being stored. Actually, I think it was one of the NPCs that they rescued, one of the other people that was being held captive. Not Nara, of course, because his brain was all gone. But I think that's where they got that information. But regardless, so they make their way to the cargo bay and manage to sneak most of the way, but get spotted. So they're in a running battle across this bridge. Now, this bridge is actually pretty interesting because there's a whole little scenario built around it. Let me just find it here for a second. It's set up as a series of tensors floating discs, but they are differently... here it is here. They have associated numbers to them, so they've got to make their way across this bridge. But sequentially, the numbers on the discs will deactivate, so they may end up falling to their doom. So they've got to work out the puzzle while they're in a running firefight with the monks of the monastery. But they successfully manage to make their way across, and once they get to the other side, they find once more that their magic stops working because this is made of the same stone that the volcano is made of. Their magics, for the most part, worked from within the ship, except when they were bound up because they had anti-magic cuffs, and also when they were within the engine room because it was filled with the same stone. So once they were out of the proximity of the stone, their magic worked, but because they're now in the proximity of this stone again, their magic ceases to function. So, and the monks know they have nowhere to go, so they're just biding their time, waiting on the other side for the party to come back. And they do indeed find what it is that they are looking for. On this side of the bridge, it is the vault where all of the items that other adventurers that have come here and met the horrible fate were all stored here. All of their items were, of course, there, as well as just some other random bits and pieces. A whole bunch of the power discs that they needed to power the item for the ship were in there, dispersed amongst the coins. And sitting in the center of the room, rather strangely, was a intellect devourer in a jar, a brain in a jar. And this brain is like using its finger to point to this thing above the door, but they weren't paying any attention. They knew what intellect devourers were because they'd encountered them before, but they figured that this intellect devourer was just, pointing at them, trying to get, because it was hungry sitting inside the jar. But when they started to gather up their equipment, the item that it was pointing at activated, and it was a giant robotic scorpion, which was the guardian of the vault. But they fought this beast with the usual reckless abandon that they have spent the rest of this campaign showing, and managed to defeat it. And when the fight was over, this intellect devourer begins pointing at something else on its jar, and there's a panel on the front of it which has a weird grill that they don't recognize, and a knob that has the word volume written across it, and the numbers are 0 to 11, because you can go all the way up to 11. So they grab the dial and they nudge it up, and the voice starts coming through, and he goes, "Oh, thank God, finally! I tried to warn you. Please, you have to help me. My name is King Katsuki. I was put in here by that demon bastard. He corrupted my designs and was planning to use his power to power his new form." And Nuru immediately recognizes the name, and much of the other party does as well. Katsuki was the skeleton that they found in Barovia, where Nuru got her wrist gauntlet gun and her hover belt, as well as the key that allowed them to access the parts of the ship that they were able to access when they went to the Equinox first time, as well as accessed parts of this vessel. And he was now an intellect devourer of some kind. And they question him about how he got there, and he explains that while in Barovia, he made a wish to free his mind, and unfortunately the dark powers made it literally so, and so his brain came loose from his body, and so he was able to escape Barovia by jumping into the body of one of the Vistani, because the Vistani can actually leave, and has been living out his life as an intellect devourer, hopping bodies and trying to find a way to undo the wish that he foolishly made. But this was also going to give them a much a vast source of backstory information, because this guy Katsuki was the chief engineer of the first vessel that they found. He was one of the original crew. He was also the man who created the wagon of MacGuffin, as well as the other items. And so this man, they were looking for him for quite some time, and they have located him in a place and in a form that they did not expect. But when they questioned him about, powering his new form, they said, "Oh, no, he's dead. We killed him." And said, "Oh, you only killed his body. His mind has been uploaded to the core." And immediately, when they realize what has gone on and where that they left Nara, Nuru freaks out, and they just start grabbing all their bits of equipment. They also find, with Katsuki's help, the shield that they had were looking for, that was taken from the dragon's lair. So they recovered the item that they were looking for in before they ended up fighting the dragon. So mission accomplished there. But once this all happened, Nuru gathered up her bits and pieces, and she literally just throws herself off the edge, activates her levitation belt, and just uses that to drift her way back. And she drifts all the way up to the spire of the ship, where the bridge is, manages to lower herself down, gets herself on there, breaks the glass, drops herself in. The rest of the party throws themselves off as well. Once they get clear of the smoke and their magic activates, they use their various means of flying propulsion, bringing along Katsuki in his jar with them, and they rush to chase down Nuru. One other item that they found in there, which was something that they weren't expecting, were all of the items that their cleric from Barovia, one of the previous NPCs, Brune, had been wielding. So they managed to get his equipment back, but they of course knew that he was dead. But obviously he had been here, and this is where the flesh golems were created, as well as in the leather works, or the medical bay of the spaceship. But anyway, so Nuru has broken off from the group, and she's just beelining it straight for the core. She sees a few monks on the way there and just disintegrates them with her gun. Just giving absolutely no care whatsoever for her own safety. She has to get back to her brother. Wallflower is chasing her. The rest of the party is just waiting above the ship because they know they're relatively safe there. And when she gets to the core, she finds that Nara is not there, and the door to where the Darius core was, where the intellect of Moloch was stored, is open. And when she peers inside, she sees her brother sitting down, glaring at her with devilish eyes, and all of the wires of this thing are in the back of his head, and he just smiles at her. And he says, "I told you this would not end until I enacted every ounce of my vengeance upon you and your pathetic party. Now witness my final victory as we descend." And she feels the ship begin to drop, and all the guys on the outside, they started putting things inside the bridge, lowering it down, and the ship falls away from them, begins to plummet towards the center of the inactive volcano. Nuru, not wanting her brother to go down, just aims her gun straight at him and says, "Well, you're not going to." She goes, "Well, you're not going to live to see the end of it," and then disintegrates her brother and finally ends Moloch. At least she assumes so. Wallflower comes in at this point and sees Nuru, freaked out after having murdered her brother in order to stop Moloch, and begins to rush her outside. They rush through the tubes. All of the monks that they pass are going, "Yes, we descend, we descend," because apparently this was going to happen eventually anyway. This was like the final act of Moloch, as their grand lord was describing to them once the plans were complete. And so they're all incredibly excited as the vessel is descending. Wallflower and Nuru rush. They get to the open cargo bay door, and Wallflower changes herself into a giant eagle and flies out, expecting Nuru to jump out after her, but Nuru is done. She's been broken. She's lost everything. And so she says that she turns her back and just throws herself out of the ship and begins to fall. Now, when that happened in the game, it really shocked me, actually, because I didn't expect her to do that. But I really do applaud the role playing of it, because she was really playing this character as someone who had been completely destroyed. And I will say, I had been torturing the character of Nuru for quite some time, but a lot of the instances were just situations where she just didn't make the right decision, or the group just happened to make the worst possible choice at the worst possible time, and shit just kept on happening to them. And the loss of her brother wasn't something that I intended. I had planned for them to hopefully join forces and to go out and defeat the Tarask, to together reunite as brother and sister and do what they were set out to do, what their family had been set out to do, and also to bring the House of Evanwood back in some way, shape, or form, because they are the members of the royal bloodline. But because of that one little thing, just leaving him in that exposed room, just that, literally that place on the ship, it all fell apart for her one more time, and Moloch was able to win, at least against Nuru. And so Wallflower is horrified by this, and the rest of the party is like, "Oh shit!" But they don't know this is happening because they've managed to fly their way back to the dock where the Sphinx was located. They see the ship falling away, and they see Wallflower's bird form spiraling down and heading towards the crater of the volcano. Now, this was a pretty bad situation, because with all of the fall damage and everything else, Nuru was dead. There was no way she was going to survive this. However, when, with the time of the fall and everything else, it took us a while to work it out, but we found out that with Wallflower's flight speed, she was able to catch up to where Nuru was falling just before she hit the ground, and was able to reduce her velocity enough that she didn't take as much damage. And so when I rolled the dice, it was not quite enough to instantly kill her, but they both took a significant amount of damage. I think, yeah, she was, unconscious. She was like like maybe 3 or 4 hit points off being instantly killed, because it would have been double her hit point maximum. Wallflower, again, nearly went unconscious, but because of her bird form, she was able to absorb most of the fall damage and was up, but very badly hurt. And she manages to pick up to Nuru. She tries to use her healing on her, but of course it won't work because they're surrounded by the rock. Her wild form, her wild shape won't work because it's magic, and magic doesn't work when they're near these stones. So she is struggling with all of her might to pull this unconscious and catatonic Nuru out of the volcano, just as the ship cracks into the ground, blasting them with rock and throwing both of them partway up the volcano's edge. And then the lava begins to spill out, and so Wallflower is once again dragging Nuru, nearly dead, and managed to very, very heroically, Mount Doom style, like in The Lord of the Rings, managed to get them out of the get Nuru out of danger. Selena had been spending a lot of time flying around through the smoke, but was unable to locate her. She had her own wings and whatnot, but yeah, that was the point that I realized that I might have taken things a little bit too far. But it all worked out in the end, and the party managed to successfully return back to the wagon with all of their party members intact, all of their loot. They had recovered the shield, which they had attempted to seize the first time against the dragon. They had defeated Moloch, and they had gained a new ally in the form of Katsuki, the brain intellect devourer, of the engineer of the Equinox, and creator of all of the fine items that the group was attempting to find in order to deal with the Tarask, as well as their main threat of Prince Garloth. And so, once they returned back to the wagon, Katsuki informed them that if they can get themselves far enough onto the beach away from the rock, they should be able to restore their magic abilities. And so, working together, they drag everything back away from the effects of the rock. They restore the wagon of MacGuffin. They reactivate Ava. They install the shield, or the shield installs itself. And their next destination, which was another island, was Katsuki's lab, as well as a very mysterious elven observatory, and the first inklings of an even greater threat than the Tarask to the world in which they have doomed. And we'll discuss this in the next Tale of Woe.